Hello and welcome back to another chat, another perspectives, and this has literally just fallen across my radar this morning, this idea of the spectacle, because I was just finishing an email correspondence with a friend who had brought up the idea of the perversion of the audience, how as an audience we've become perverted, and that made me think about how we are living in this kind of theatre of the absurd. And I was reminded of the essay published in the late 60s, I think 1967, by the French critical philosopher Guy Debord, called The Society of the Spectacle, how everything has become a spectacle and has become a kind of consumable. And I think that's the case, is that and it's harder to realize it in this age of television, social media. I was reminded also of an essay done several decades ago by the philosopher Walter Benjamin called Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, and how when we experience the world through mechanical reproduction, i.e. A secondary medium such as television, the internet, films, photography, then of course it becomes mechanical and it becomes separated from the original. And it seems that we are more and more mediating our experience through these secondary constructs, and they are manufacturing the reality for us. It's a reproduction of the original. And the more that we stay at home, the more that we are perhaps forced to stay at home because of life is a hazard, more people are working from home, and we are mediating our relationships through electronic means, then we are experiencing the world through a reproduction, a secondary construct, as it were, and we get away from the essential. And the more that we experience the world through that, the more that certain agendas can manipulate how the world is presented. And then we come to the spectacle, or we come to the theatre of the absurd, or as I call it, the theatre of the unreal. And I remember that I did talk about this in a book I published in 2019 called Healing the Wounded Mind. And I did have a chapter called The Spectacle of the Absurd, and a part on it was called The Theatre of the Unreal. And we're living more and more through this theatre, and we can see that with world events. I mean, the world events on the ground are physically real, and people are hurting, and there's a lot of suffering. But the way that is presented to the majority of people through social media, through television, etc., becomes a theatre. And therefore, as we know, that the narrative gets manipulated when it comes through a theatre, and we're getting a reproduction of it. And so our mental life, our emotional life is being targeted and manipulated through an agency of reproduction. And so the question is, are we getting what is essential? Are we being fed on the real nutrients, or on the kind of GM modified kind of food? And there's excuse me, I need some glasses for this. You see, I'm not prepared, just totally kind of off the cuff, as they say. But there's a line as I was reading it this morning. It's a so-called anonymous phrase. When the gods want to punish us, they make us believe our own advertising, or call that our own propaganda. When the gods want to punish us, they make us believe our own propaganda. And the thing is, in the last few years, especially in the last decade, we've been more and more pushed to live life through this kind of spectacle. We have Big Brother started it, Big Brother television, where people were living under 24/7 surveillance, and so they acted out this their lives for the viewers. And this reality television has taken over most of the television. I don't watch it, but I observe it. And we have so much reality television where people are supposedly living real life, but it's not. We're getting used to living through a kind of absurd theatre, and we're getting used to living through a reproduction. And so we live through these narratives, and we're getting further and further away from ourselves and what may be our truths. And so, there's another line here from the writer and critic Umberto Eco. Umberto Eco said, "People move from one act of consumption to another in a sort of purposeless bulimia." Bulimia, the disease, we consume so much in a way that we just vomit it out very quickly, and we don't get fed from it. And that, I feel, is happening more and more when I just look around at what news that I'm being fed, whether through algorithms or news feeds, or when I go searching for it. It's more and more just kind of searching through the scraps of the theatre of the unreal. And I think we have to be aware of these iterations of distance from any semblance of the truth. I mean, even in this physical domain, it's not, although it's within a metaphysical construct, we are certain iterations away from the truth, because we are living in the phenomenal domain, not the real. But then within this domain of the unreal, the physical domain, there's further gradations of untruths. And each time that we are distanced from the source of information, we are in another layering away from the truth. And we are seeing that so much in the narratives being spread around. And another story that came to mind as I was thinking this is it's a kind of favorite of mine, and in fact I did put it in the first chapter of this book, and I would like to read it here, if you'll allow me, if you don't switch off, that is. Okay, and I was talking about also how modern life tries to eradicate the enigma, the magic, the mystery, and the soulful elements. It tries to eradicate it because the modern life that we know, the age of reproduction, can't really communicate these aspects. They don't know how to talk about it. So they want to take people away from these aspects and put them in the theatre of the unreal, because these soulful elements, they can't communicate it. Here's a story. A lion was captured and imprisoned in a reserve where, to his surprise, he found other lions that had been there for many years, some even their whole life, having been born in captivity. The newcomer soon became familiar with the activities of the other lions and observed how they were arranged in different groups. One group was dedicated to socializing, another to show business, whilst yet another group was focused on preserving the customs, culture and history from the time the lions were free. There were church groups and others that had attracted the literary or artistic talent. There were also revolutionaries who devoted themselves to plot against their captors and against other revolutionary groups. Occasionally, a riot broke out and one group was removed or killed all the camp guards, so that they had to be replaced by another set of guards. However, the newcomer also noticed the presence of a lion that always seemed to be asleep. He did not belong to any group and was oblivious to them all. This line appeared to arouse both admiration and hostility from the others. One day the newcomer approached this solitary lion and asked him which group he belonged to. "Do not join any group," said the lion. "Those poor ones deal with everything but the essential." "And what is essential?" asked the newcomer. "It is essential to study the nature of the fence." I like that story. Whilst all around us we are creating these groups of social political life and revolutionaries and religious spiritual groups and cultural groups, etc., etc., perhaps we're missing the essential of observing the fence that keeps us exactly where we are, in the state we're in the perceptual level we're in, and in the human condition we're in. In all these things, within the spectacle, within the society of the spectacle, within the theatre of the unreal, our work perhaps is to find what is the essential and to focus on that. So that's just my morning perspective. So thanks again for listening in. Cheers.